All right, cool. So in theory, this is working. Um, I'm not sure if it is, but I'm hoping it is. So I did a test and it worked. So anyway, I know I'm not here, but hopefully I'm here in spirit. And let's go ahead and get started. So a couple big things. One, to start class, it's kind of how we do, so it shouldn't be new to any of us. Let's bounce out to the general channel. And if you see this HL lecture 914, that is just the meeting I had at 7 o'clock last night, recording myself to do this. So don't worry about, excuse me, any of this down here, especially this meeting that's like super short. It's just a wonky sound test. But you will also see this video that you're watching right here. So I don't know what happens if you click on that. If you're watching the video of me showing you this video and you click on it, it might go to another dimension or something. But do that at your own risk. What you really need to look at is right here, 914 lesson plans, where I tell you that I'm sorry I'm not with you all, but I'm moving. And it's a big move. And most importantly, the cats are very protective of all things. So I have to protect the movers, you know. But what you need to do is this. Um, this video is going to walk you through the entire lecture. Um, but then you're also going to maybe want to download the PowerPoint, because I don't know. I'm trying to pretend that there's students here and going kind of the speed we go through a lecture. I'm sure we'll get through all of it. I don't know if you'll have all the time to take down the notes or what have you. So if you need to, well, on the CJ, which is posted for this week, there is no homework. It might not hurt if you have time to just go and download this lecture from today and copy down any notes you need into your notebook to make sure that you're caught up and all Gucci. What you are going to need to do, now remember, for both of these, you got to click the ellipse and you click download. Do not open it in Teams. Don't edit it in some desktop app. Download it in Teams, especially this, the HL Literary Defense Practice Sheet. That is the entire ninth grade's worksheet that you're working on today and tomorrow while I'm gone, especially. All right, it's really important that for yourself and for your peers, you don't screw this up. All right, because I'm not going to be here to just re-upload it if somebody messes this up by accident. So you really need to take some responsibility. Make sure you download this. This is like the nth time we've done this. So I'm confident you will. And if you do screw it up, you will fail. So don't do that. So that's the T. So if you notice, we'll go over our CJ really quick. There it is. Look at that. A whole lot of no homework, except for Wednesday. But don't sweat Wednesday's homework. I know it says you're going to post your final literary defense, which is the sheet you're working on now, and into a channel. And it's going to be in our own class channels. We don't even sweat it till Wednesday. I'll tell you more about this on Wednesday when I'm back. And Tuesday night, I'll try to create this channel. If I don't create it Tuesday night, I'll create it Wednesday morning. Probably after like first period or something. But you'll just have to post it in there, or I'll do it before first period, and we'll actually just all during Wednesday we'll post it together. But for some reason, you're not entirely done by the time you have our lit class on Wednesday. I guess it'll be homework. So this shouldn't even be homework, but you know. Anyway, so we're going to discuss Monday and Tuesday stuff. We are going to review Whitman's Oh Captain, My Captain, so make sure that your graphic organizer is complete. And hopefully you've already turned that in because it was due at 8 a.m. So again, as long as you turned it in and did everything we talked about on Friday, you should be Gucci. Anyway, so we'll talk about Walt Whitman's Captain, Oh Captain, My Captain, mood, tone, the poem in general. And then we'll discuss a little bit about what you do today and what you're going to do tomorrow on Wednesday, on Thursday, and then Friday, I'm going to assign your first actual literary defense. And again, everything we've done. So this graphic organizer is going to be really helpful. The literary defense practice worksheet and today's lecture and tomorrow's video should all help you get a little bit of confidence in writing this. So don't overthink it. We'll get there. But with that, let's go ahead and get into what we're doing today. So let me hop over to our PowerPoint. So literary defense, creating argument out of your opinions. So like I said, a big part of this class isn't just writing our own creative works like poems and short stories, or being scholars and analyzing other people's poems and short stories, which we already have to pretty good effect. But at the end of the day, it's just really being able to learn how to create an opinion about something and then defend it, right? Because that's really what you're doing as a literary critic or as a scholar or just an educated individual who has an opinion. If you can't back it up, if you can't support it, then your opinions, you're going to have a hard time trying to sell people on your opinions. They'll still matter, but no one's going to probably take them as serious as they would if you're able to back it up. It's not as difficult as it might seem, so don't overthink it, right? So get an opinion or claim. So I like to think of as opinion. When you hear it in Lang, it's going to be called a claim. So we'll stick with that language. You're going to make a claim about something. You have opinion about something. You're staking a claim in it. So a claim, first and foremost, must be arguable. So for instance, if you're like out and about and you're like, oh, hey, did you know the sky is blue? I think the sky, it's not an opinion, it's the truth. Right? You can't be like, hey, man, Tucson's the capital of Phoenix. Because it doesn't even make sense, right? If you're like, Tucson's the capital of Arizona, it's not arguable. It's not true, right? You can't prove that Tucson's the capital of Arizona. All you got to do is look up what's the capital of Arizona. It's Phoenix, right? So basic things like that, those are just statements. And sometimes they're true statements, sometimes they're false statements. But there's no way to argue the truth or untruth, I guess, of statements like that. So you go. For instance, saying the sky is blue, it's not a claim. Okay, you can't argue that. Murder is a capital crime. Yes, it is. Can't argue that. Now, can you argue whether someone did or did not commit that crime? Yes. Can you argue what the penalty for that crime should be, given the evidence presented? Yes. But you can't argue whether or not murder is a crime. So, for instance, kind of bringing this back on stuff we've talked about, saying Jamaica Kincaid's girl has two characters. It's not a claim. That's just it's true, right? There's a mother and there's a daughter. That's it. You can't argue that. Kate Chopin was a latter addition to the canon. Yeah, it's true. Just as she wasn't there originally. We talked about that when she was added later in the 60s to the literary canon. It's just a fact, okay? So those sorts of things you can't argue, right? And in other words, arguable means there is more than a simple I disagree response, right? So people can always disagree with you, even if you do make a claim. Like you could say, the MCU is better than the DCEU, right? So we can say, I disagree with that, right? But saying something as simple as this is better, or I thought this movie was bad, or I think that anime is the best type of medium, something like that is what you don't want to do. Hang on, why is Edda here? There you go. I'm sorry, I booted Edda, but she popped in for some reason. So if throughout the night, for some reason, you pop in and I boot you out, it's because you're not supposed to be here. And also, it's Sunday at 7:42. What are you people doing, man? You should be relaxing. It's your weekend. Go away. You have plenty of time to do all this lit stuff. Teachers are having you up at 7:42 on your Sunday. That's insane. Okay. Get some rest. Anyways, so anyway, it needs to be arguable, which means you have to have points to it. So saying like the MC is better than the DCEU, right? Would be difficult because there's nothing like why. Someone asks like why is it better? So if someone has to ask why something is better, you haven't presented an actual claim yet. It's your opinion, but it's not a claim because in order for something to be arguable, there has to be points to argue. And you say it's better character development. It's holds more truth to its source material. The cinematography is stronger and more engaging. Well, now you have 3 points that you could argue. Okay. So that's important too. You can't just make flippant statements like, you know, doing the dishes sucks. It probably does. Why? It's like, well, I have an aversion to getting my hands wet. I don't like the feel of it. I also don't think it's fair that I always do it every day. There's more people in this family than just me, so we should share the work. And I certainly didn't dirty all the plates. Why am I cleaning more of them? Kind of arguable points, right? And so when it says when I say that something is arguable, it's meaning your argument or your opinion requires evidence or proof to support it, right? So you not only have to have points, but then you have to back it up. Okay. And remember, at the end of the day, we don't want to look at argument as like as a model for war. It's not just about you winning. Like sometimes people aren't going to agree with you that, manga is the best thing in the world, or because it's has a great it's a great form of storytelling, and the animation is far superior than a lot of Western styles. You might say, um, people might just simply not agree and have good counterpoints to why the character development MCU movies is not superior to any other comic book adaptation. So the point isn't about winning. The point is just simply bringing your opinions to light and having people consider them. And then people bring their counter arguments or their points to light, and you consider them, and so you become an educated, well-rounded, insightful person. And that's the goal at the end of the day. It's not winning or losing. You might not be able to get out of doing the dishes, but maybe at least maybe you'll plant the seed of consideration in a parent's mind. And that's as much of a win as we can hope for at the end of the day. So how do you support a claim with proof? So you do actually, let's say you come up with a good opinion, a good claim that's arguable and has points. Well, what is your proof? Well, that can be tricky, right? Um, what is proof or evidence? Where does it come from? Well, in our case right now, all we're going to worry about is using literally the story or the poem or the novel that we just read as our proof. We're not going to do any synthesis yet, which means bringing outside sources in. Now, obviously, we will do some of that towards the end of the year, and you're definitely going to do that in AP Lang and AP Lit, history. You're going to get used to either synthesis or what's your DBQs, which is essentially just bringing outside sources in also. So it's all kind of synthesis. But don't worry about that yet. We're not doing that right now, right? We're just going to use whatever text we just read to find our evidence. It's the easiest way to do it. So here's some strong points. You don't really have to write down it's what you use to support your claim unless you want to, but that's what evidence is, right? That should be pretty straightforward at this point. You make a claim, this person committed a murder. Prove it. Well, I need to find evidence. I need to find, maybe some video footage of a person entering a home, some security cam footage, and then, have some fingerprints and footprints, maybe some eyewitnesses, right? They can't come up with an alibi. So you start building this case off of different pieces of evidence to try to prove a claim that somebody did a crime or did not do a crime. In the case of literary defense, it comes from the story, poem, novel, or supplementary texts. And again, we're not worrying about supplementary texts yet, but it is important that, when you see things that have citations in them and what have you, that's being pulled from outside sources or supplementary texts. So how you explain your evidence or tie it to your claim, your rationale rather, will determine the strength of your argument, right? So if you can't really describe why the animation in manga is better than its Western counterparts, if you just say it just is, well, how? It just is, man. Just read some manga, man. Or if you're arguing for anime, watch some anime. That's not arguing, right? That's just fighting. You're just saying, dude, you don't really have a good reason. You have an idea for a reason, but you're not presenting any evidence. Like, what are some things that make it better? Is it the natural flow of the lines and the aesthetic value that it presents there? Is it how the images complement the story itself that's being told through text? Those are things you could argue. Simply saying it isn't good enough. You have to be able to articulate it. You have to have some rationale behind your decision. So for those keeping score who just, I care about my grade, whatever, then be able to really explain your evidence well, and it'll help your grade. But more importantly, it's going to make you a more educated person, right? Instead of someone who's just like, well, it is, and just fights and no one wants to talk to you because you just come off as whining rather than being an articulate arguer. Okay. And that's what I want to see. I want to see people who can articulate their ideas and gain the respect of their peers and people around them because they're educated and reliable sources of information. Actually, so I'll give you a minute if you need at the most to just kind of copy down what you need off of this slide. Okay. And I'll look around the room. Forlorn. I feel bad for Etta. She just popped in here. It's like, what's going on? It's boom, booted. So I apologize that I had to boot you, but that's my explanation. No sneak peeks of today's wonderful lesson. Okay. So what does evidence need to be? It's a great question. Accurate. Okay, so there's three things: accurate, sufficient, and relevant. All right, so right now, what does it mean to be accurate? Well, you have to be credible, or your source has to be credible or correct, right? Well, what you might be thinking, what if, well, if we're just using a text we read, like if I'm going to talk about the tone in Emily Dickinson's A Narrow Fell in the Grass, like if I'm using her own poem, isn't that accurate? Sure, everything you need is there. She wrote the poem. It's your job to just come up with a good reason why the tone you chose is the tone you chose from that text. So part of being accurate in the case of using a parts, so let's say parts, in the case of using parts of a text, this means your interpretation is also accurate, or you have other sources to back your interpretation up, created by other scholars or good logic or reasoning on your part. So that kind of, it might be a little bit wordy and confusing, but what that means is, you know, if you say the tone of Emily Dickinson's Narrow Fell in the Grass is anxious and confident, well, then you have to go in and explain like where words and phrases that might induce anxiety in the reader or express anxiety in the topic, which is a snake. How is she being confident? How is her argument confident? Right? So you have to go through and explain that logically. Now, if you were doing a synthesis essay of some kind, you could go out and find other sources that support you and say, well, this is the type of tone she created, and this is the type of word usage that supports that. So you could use that as a supplementary source to back up what you did. But at the end of the day, you still have to explain it using your own words. And those sources are just there to kind of help you out along the way. So for instance, using the imagery and tone from Dickinson's Narrow Fell in the Grass to make the claim that she is defining a snake is reasonable as long as you can logically make that connection. So again, if you can go through and find words and phrases and images that support that this thing's a snake and it makes sense, well, then there you go. And obviously you can find a lot of literature on it being a snake. There's a lot of other debates you can make and claims about, well, what that might be a metaphor for, or what she might be saying contextually bigger in society, things like that. If you're just trying to figure out, like we did in class, like, what do you think she's defining here? Well, we gave our opinion, then we had to find some proof, be able to explain why that proof supports the idea it's a snake. So here's an example, all right? And I'm not going to spend a lot of time letting you read this paragraph, but if you were making the claim that Dickinson is describing a snake in her poem, you might say something like this. When Dickinson describes the creature's movement through the grass as parting it like a comb, combined with the reactions of the people who see it, tighter breathing and zero at the bone, it narrows down what the animal must be, a low-to-the-ground being that strikes fear into people. That alone should be enough to define a snake. However, Dickinson also gives a more objective description, saying it looked like a whip lash unbraiding in the sun. And as she moved to look at it, it moved quickly away. The only animal that fits these descriptive features is a snake. So it's a very simple, just several sentences using some quotes, using some paraphrasing, an explanation why this thing has to be narrowed down to a snake. People are naturally afraid of snakes. This is a creature that's low to the ground, that splits the grass like a comb. And if that's not enough to sell it, the thing looks like a whip and kind of unbraids in the sun. And when someone tries to touch it, it darts away. What else? What other creature does this? What other low to the ground, limbless creature scares people and looks like these things? A snake. All right, so it's reasonable. A reasonable person looks at this and says, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. I see why that could be a snake." Right? It's not super long. It's not repetitive. It's just here's a line from the poem, and here's why it supports the fact that it's a snake. So next thing, after being accurate, and don't worry, you're going to see that example again in your worksheet that you downloaded. So what does evidence need to be? Well, it also needs to be relevant, right? Your sources need to be on the topic being discussed. So for instance, you wouldn't go using Dickinson's poem to defend a claim about how a narrow fellow in the grass reflects feminist views of masculinity during her time if the discussion were simply on what she was defining in the poem. All right, so just the point is make sure that your evidence and what you're arguing, what you're bringing in to support your argument is actually on topic. I'll give you a second. I guess I'll go back. You can look at that. So the next thing, what does evidence need to be? Sufficient. That means you have enough, right? So, even if you're just using the text itself, I didn't use one example. I just didn't say, oh, whatever this creature is splits the grass like a comb. So it must be a snake because what else splits the grass like a comb? Well, like lizards could, insects could. There's a variety of things, that could come close to a snake that split the grass like a comb. It could be the wind, right? If that's the only thing I'm using, because a lot of people said, oh, maybe it's something more natural like the wind or something like that. And it could be, right? And how do we know that it's low to the ground? Its body is spinning. It could. I mean, people are saying it's different types of animals, like depending on the animal moving through the grass. Like if even if it's a big animal, it can still move the grass like a comb. So there needs to be a level of sufficiency when describing this. So it's like, okay, not only does it split the grass like a comb, that's a great visual. It looks like a whiplash and it unravels and it moves quickly when trying to be touched. And guess what? Anyone who sees it is scared of it innately. Okay, well, now we're narrowing it down a lot. Aside from people with unique phobias of the wind uh, and other things like that, like what else would fit all of these key descriptors? So one piece of evidence or one observation from the text would not be enough to support the claim that Dickinson is defining a snake. Right? It's going to take at least 3 or 4 pieces of evidence with good explanations and clear explanations to do that. So be sure to truly exploit your source. And what exploitation here means is to think of the connotations and some of the denotations. Is there symbolism tied to it? Like what's going on? Is it a metaphor for something? Then explain that metaphor. So I discussed mood in a text, I did more than say. Hang on, it's gonna bug me. Yeah. Hang on. All right. When what it means is when I discussed mood in a text, I did more than say the mood of a narrow fellow in the grass. Hang on, I don't mean mood. Hang on. I feel like I have a repeat slide in here by accident. All right, let's try that again. Sorry. Okay, so when I discussed the tone in a text, I did more than say, oh gosh, why am I talking about mood? There you go. All right, second time's a charm. The tone of a narrow fellow in the grass as anxious and confident because she uses strong phrasing and describes the fears people have. Like if I just said that, if I said the tone of a narrow fellow in the grass is anxious and confident because she uses strong phrasing and describes the fear people have of snakes, that's not untrue. But strong phrasing and exploiting and describing people's fears, those are two things I have to now give examples of and explain how those examples come back and support an anxious tone and or a confident tone. All right, so right now, this isn't a complete answer. The tone of narrow fellow in the grass is anxious and confident because she uses strong phrasing and describes the fears people have of snakes. That's true. How? Right? So if someone said this to me, if you said this to me in one of our discussions, or you turn, in a short answer like that, my question would be how? How does she do that? Like, you're right, but how? Prove it. And that's what you have to do. So you'd be missing a huge part of that answer. And it's also kind of a circular argument. So that's all I'm saying in this next bullet is just what I just said. Is I need more than you saying it's anxious and confident because it's anxious and confident. Right? You do have, if someone said this, and you should say this because you're providing the points that you'll talk about going forward. But I need to now see those points from the text and your explanation for them. So I'll give you a second to maybe look this over one last time, try to write it down. Like I said, don't want to, this is already kind of getting to be a long lecture, and I know that, I'm sorry. But you can download this PowerPoint, kind of review it on your own if you need. So here's an example of, if someone asks me, what's the tone of An Arrow Fell in the Grass by Emily Dickinson, I'd say, well, the tone is anxious and confident. I would say something like this example, which again is also in your worksheet that you can reference. The tone of An Arrow Fellow in the Grass is anxious and confident. For instance, she describes people's reactions as, but never met this fellow, attended her alone, without a tighter breathing, and zero at the bone. Essentially saying that alone or not, when faced with a snake, people are scared to the bone. The sense of tighter breathing elicits anxiety in a reader as well. Furthermore, in stanza 3, Dickinson describes the habitats snakes prefer. People are more likely to think of bogs as scary, undesirable places. Humans like temperate climates, not places too cool, using a quote, for corn. A place like that would make most individuals uncomfortable, and that's the point, to make the reader uncomfortable. Throughout the poem, Dickinson never ceases to relent with accuracy and tenacity the defining characteristics of a snake. For these reasons, she imbues her reader with a sense of anxiety while confidently illustrating the charm, no pun intended, of a snake. Right? So again, I'm making the same points I did previously, but I'm giving examples from the text and I'm explaining them, or I'm paraphrasing something from the text and explaining it. And that's all there is to it. Does it take a little more time than just some short, lazy answer? Absolutely. But if you don't want a short, lazy grade, you got to put in the effort. If you don't want to be seen as just short and lazy as a person intellectually, you got to be able to figure these things out in a discussion. And that's just the T. Okay, so that's all I have to say. But I'm not just going to abandon you yet or ever. We're going to do some practice. So open your literary defense practice sheet on your own PC, your own copy. Do not use it in Teams. Do not open it on one of these wonky online apps. Make sure you have downloaded it. It is on your own PC or your phone or whatever device you're using, a tablet, Magic Seeing Stone, I don't know, whatever you're using. Right, so make sure it's not going to edit anything for any of your classmates in this class, and especially if you're not period 7, even if you are period 7, you still won't make this mistake. But if this is like period 1 or 3, you still have a bunch of periods coming up, and those people need a clean, fresh worksheet to work with. So download it. Open it up. Be sure you download it and not editing through apps. So I'm just reinforcing that 100%. Don't screw it up. All right, so let's go ahead and look at it. And I'll explain what's going on here. So don't get overwhelmed, okay? We're going to share this, and it's going to be a constructive thing, okay? I want everybody to do it. I want everybody to post it. You and I are going to have a problem if you don't have this complete by Wednesday, because you need to practice this. If you're not practicing this, if you're just kind of like, oh, whatever, I'll figure it out as I go. Like, you need to be doing these things because you're going to get really far behind really fast, starting right now with a lot of the writing that's coming up. You're certainly not going to be able to enjoy any of the creative writing or the creative projects we have because you're going to be busy making up, poor essays that you're going to be angry because you made me read a bad essay. And I'm not about that. All right, so here's sort of a prompt. I mean, it's not sort of a prompt, it literally is the prompt. How does Jamaica Kincaid characterize tone in girl? How does Jamaica Kincaid characterize tone in girl? All that means is, what is the tone in girl? Okay, so characterize is just fancy way of saying, like, what is the tone in girl? Consider the words the character of mother uses, the short successive phrases. How does mother react when her daughter asks questions? How does the fact that the whole story is one sentence contribute to the story's tone? Now, these follow-up questions and statements, you don't have to cover every part of that. You don't have to cover the short successive phrases. You don't have to just focus on the word choice of mother. You don't have to focus on then focus on how she reacts to her daughter, and then focus on how the whole story is one sentence. These are just ideas. Each one of these things you could look at and figure out tone. Okay. Now, part of what we're going to do tomorrow, I'm going to have a little bit about writing an introduction sentence, and we're definitely going to talk more about introduction sentences down the road, but they're super simple and they're really easy to just kind of literally have a formula, plug and chug, and then gives you time to focus on the actual meat of an argument or meat of a literary defense, which is like your body paragraphs. If you're writing an essay, if you're doing a debate, the different speeches you'll give in a debate, kind of like your paragraphs in an essay. Introduction, you can get through it, and then you can get to the meat of your argument. So all I want you to do, everybody, when we share these Wednesday, when you post them Wednesday, we talk about them on Thursday. In Jamaica Kincaid's Girl, she characterizes tone as. Now, in this blank, you come up with what you think the tone is. All right, and that shouldn't be that hard. We did have some, discussion about it. We had the short answer questions that we answered. I don't remember if that was one where everybody did it and I just selected certain people to answer it, or I assigned certain people questions. But either way, you should have them all filled out, because when people are answering them, you should be filling those out too. So it shouldn't take you much time to actually figure out what we decided the tone of girl was, or to figure out a tone for girl. And this one might be a little bit confusing, but don't overthink it. This is best illustrated in her. And this is where you'll literally write. This is illustrated in her word choice, or this is illustrated in her sentence structure, or this is illustrated in the dialogue, or this is illustrated in the repetition of phrasing. So what this is like, what is the one element? Because you're only going to write one paragraph. That's it. That's all we're working on right now. That's all we're going to be working on for a minute. Okay, one paragraph. If you can't write one decent paragraph, why would I have you write 3 or 4 not decent paragraphs? It's a waste of your time and my time. So we're really going to focus on how do you write a good paragraph, and then we'll take it from there. So anyway, my point is, you decide what the tone is, and then you're going to decide on what is it about girl that made you think that's what the tone is. And then you just got to prove it, right? So like I say, great work. You've basically written a functional body paragraph, or intro paragraph. Now try to write just one paragraph that defends your claim on how Kincaid characterized tone, or what the tone of girl is. Remember to use the examples from the PowerPoint attached below as a guide. Please write your rough draft paragraph here. And originally this had lines, and then I realized, like, if you actually are typing it out, that doesn't really matter. Just go ahead and fill this out, type it out, right? And we go down here, and there's your examples, right? So I gave you the prompt. What is Dickinson defining in her poem "An Arrow Fell in the Grass"? And I just give you kind of a generic intro, 2-sentence intro paragraph, and then that paragraph I shared from the PowerPoint. Example 2, what would the prompt be for example 2? How does Dickinson characterize tone in her poem "An Arrow Fell in the Grass"? Here's another just generic plug and chug introduction paragraph, and then here's what I told you in the text. So hopefully these models, hopefully the lecture gives you a sense of what you need to write in a literary defense. Okay, so all I'm asking is, what is the tone of Jamaica Kincaid's Girl? And then I'm asking you to tell me what that is, and then say, I think this is the tone because of her word choice and how she talks to her daughter. And you just go in and find 2 or 3 examples. and say she talks to her daughter like this, and given the circumstances, explain why that would create the tone you think it does. She uses this kind of phrasing throughout the entire story. And it's continuous. She keeps repeating the same words and phrases. And that, I think, creates this kind of tone because, and you tell me why, you know? And you can use anything you want, your own experience as a kid, talking to a parent, your own experience from any aspect of what that story is talking about. So from now on, you have, I don't know, I think you have like maybe 15 or 20 minutes to do this left in class. So that's what you need to be doing. You need to have this downloaded and you need to be working on this earnestly. No one can check out of class, obviously. Don't do it. We can see it in Spork. We will find you. We will end you if you do that. And I trust you guys. You guys are awesome. You people, you gals, you ninth graders. I thought someone like popped back in. I was like, no, I hate kicking people out. I feel so bad. And again, Etta, I'm so sorry I kicked you out, but it had to be done. Anyway, so, all right, my people, work for the rest of class on this. Tomorrow, we're gonna watch a video. I'm gonna kind of pause it and explain some things as we go, and hopefully it'll give you a better idea just hearing it from somebody else and me kind of tutoring you through it, what these things look like. And then you'll have some time to tweak it. And then before you know it, it'll be Wednesday and I'll be back. And we can talk about Oh Captain, My Captain, and then review some of the stuff we went over today and some of the stuff we're going over tomorrow. All right. So thanks so much for hanging in there. Hopefully this lecture turned out the way I envisioned in my head. I miss you guys, and I'll catch you on Wednesday. Peace.